This presentation is for Chapter 7, Master Budgets. In Learning Objective 4, we will learn to prepare the financial budget for a manufacturing company. So manufacturers will prepare their cash budget and their budgeted financial statements, the income statement, balance sheet, and budgeted statement of cash flows. But before we do those budgets, we need to make sure that we have prepared our capital expenditures budget. Capital expenditures are purchases of long-term assets such as a delivery truck, computer systems, office furniture, and manufacturing equipment. The decision to purchase these very expensive long-term assets is part of the business's strategic plan. For this presentation, we are going to assume that Smart Touch Learning plans to purchase additional manufacturing equipment on January 2nd, 2027. The equipment will cost $160,000, and that will be paid in equal installments of $40,000 during each of the 4 quarters of 2027. We will see these installment payments will be included in the cash budget. So the cash budget is going to pull information from other budgets that we have already prepared. The cash budget has 3 sections: cash receipts, cash payments, and short-term financing. The first part of the cash budget is to complete the schedule of cash receipts. So the primary source of cash for Smart Touch Learning is from the customers. So we will start at the top of the schedule of cash receipts with the total sales that were projected from the sales budget for each of the 4 quarters. So we see for the first quarter that Smart Touch Learning projected the sales would be $250,000. Now we had a beginning balance or ending balance for accounts receivable on the December 31st, 2026 balance sheet of $70,000. We would expect to collect the $70,000 in the first quarter of 2027. Also, Smart Touch Learning estimates that 30% of their first quarter sales will be cash sales that will be collected in that quarter. So 30% of $250,000 is $75,000. The remaining $175,000 in sales for the first quarter will be on account. Smart Touch Learning projects that 60% of the $175,000 or $105,000 will be collected in the first quarter. The remaining 40% or $70,000 will be collected in the second quarter. We would add together the collections from the accounts receivable, the cash sales, and the credit sales, and that would give us total cash receipts from our customers for the first quarter of $250,000. We would complete the same types of calculations for the second, third, and the fourth quarters, and we would show the total cash receipts from customers for each of the 4 quarters and the total for the year. Now, there would be a balance in accounts receivable at the end of the year. That would be equal to 40% of the credit sales for the fourth quarter. If we calculated that amount, it would be $91,000. The $91,000 will be the accounts receivable balance on the December 31st, 2027 budgeted balance sheet. Next, we are going to talk about cash payments. So cash payments will come from, again, other budgets that we have completed. The capital expenditures budget, and then the product cost from direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead budgets, as well as the period cost from the selling and administrative expense budget. And then we will be given information on the income taxes that are expected to be paid by Smart Touch Learning. This is a schedule of the cash payments for Smart Touch Learning. At the top of the schedule, we start off with the direct materials purchases from the direct materials budget. Smart Touch Learning will make payments of those in the 4 quarters. But first, we're going to take the accounts payable balance that was shown on the December 31st, 2026 balance sheet of $20,000. Smart Touch Learning expects to pay that balance in the first quarter. Then we take the direct materials purchases for the first quarter, and Smart Touch Learning projects that they will pay 75% of that balance, or $48,825 in the first quarter. They will pay the remaining balance of $16,275 in the second quarter. We would take the direct materials purchases for the second, third, and fourth quarter, and we would make the same calculations to calculate the total payments to be made for direct materials for the first, second, third, and fourth quarters and for the total. Now we will have a balance in accounts payable at December 31st, 2027 for 25% of the direct materials purchases in the fourth quarter of $102,000. So the accounts payable balance shown at the bottom of the schedule, $25,500, that amount will be shown in the budgeted balance sheet for December 31st, 2027. Now, as we look down the schedule of cash payments, we will see that we are going to pick up the amounts for the payments for direct labor from that budget, manufacturing overhead for that budget, selling and administrative from that budget, and then we are given the amounts that Smart Touch Learning expects to pay for income taxes, $17,500 for each of the 4 quarters, and then we see the amounts that we expect to pay for the capital expenditures from that budget, which they had told us would be $40,000 for each quarter. Now we would add together all of the amounts for each of the quarters for the cash payments, and at the bottom of the schedule we see the total cash payments that Smart Touch Learning expects for each of the 4 quarters and for the total for the year. These cash payments will now be taken to the actual cash budget. This slide shows the cash budget. So we see at the top of the budget the beginning cash balance of $15,000. That would have come from the actual balance sheet for December 31st, 2026. Then we are going to add to that our cash receipts that we calculated in the schedule of cash receipts. If you remember, the first quarter was $250,000, and we see the amounts that are projected for cash receipts for the second, third, and fourth quarter, and we see the total for the year. We add the beginning cash balance and the cash receipts, and we get cash available. Then we see the totals for the cash payments that were calculated in the cash payment schedule. The total cash payments that we project for the first quarter is $240,715. When we subtract that from the total cash available of $265,000, we get what we project to be the ending cash balance before financing of $24,284. Smart Touch Learning's management would like to have a minimum cash balance at the end of each quarter of $30,000. So for the first quarter, they would have a cash deficiency of $5,715. So Smart Touch Learning's management would have to borrow the amount that would be needed to maintain the minimum cash balance desired. Smart Touch Learning's management has a credit already set up to borrow in $1,000 increments at the end of each quarter. So on this slide we see where Smart Touch Learning would borrow $6,000 to meet the cash deficiency of $5,715. $715 projected for the first quarter. When we add the $6,000 to the $24,285 projected cash balance before financing, we get the ending cash balance for the first quarter of $30,285, and that would become the beginning balance for cash for the second quarter, as shown on the slide. Notice that there was no interest expense shown in the first quarter because there was no notes payable balance shown on the balance sheet at December 31st, 2026. However, on this slide we see that SmartTouch Learning does have interest expense. So the interest rate on the borrowing for $6,000 was 3% per quarter. So we would multiply 3% times 6,000 and we would get interest expense as shown for the second quarter of $180. That would be added to our total cash payments. We would subtract our total cash payments of $268,095 from our total cash available of $298,285, and that gives us a projected cash balance of $30,190 for the second quarter. That is more than our minimum cash balance of $30,000. So we would have a projected cash excess for the second quarter of $190. We would not have to do any further borrowing, but we would also not have enough cash available to repay the $6,000 loan. We can see at the end of the second quarter the cash balance is $30,190, and that becomes the beginning cash balance for the third quarter. Now we can see the completed cash budget for SmartTouch Learning. In the third quarter, SmartTouch Learning would still owe $180 in interest expense on the $6,000 outstanding amount borrowed in the first quarter because they have not been able to pay that back. However, at the end of the third quarter, they project their cash balance to be $38,995, which, after subtracting the minimum cash balance, gave SmartTouch Learning a cash excess of $8,995 that allowed them to repay the entire $6,000 that had been borrowed, and they have an ending cash balance for the third quarter of $32,995 that becomes the beginning balance for the fourth quarter of the year. SmartTouch Learning owed no interest in the fourth quarter because they had completely repaid the $6,000 loan, and we can see the projected ending cash balance before financing of $54,480 did exceed the minimum cash balance by $24,480, so no additional borrowing was needed in the fourth quarter. We see at the end of the fourth quarter that the ending cash balance for SmartTouch Learning is $54,480. That amount will be shown on the budgeted balance sheet as the cash balance at December 31st, 2027. Now, one additional note about completing the total column for the cash budget is you have to again look at the beginning balance for cash. That will go all the way back to the beginning balance that was on the balance sheet, the $15,000. We would add the total cash receipts that were projected to get total cash available. We would subtract total cash payments, and that gives us the $54,480 that we did project in the fourth quarter. And again, that would be the balance that would be shown on the budgeted balance sheet. Now we would be ready to complete the budgeted income statement. We would be able to obtain our sales revenue, cost of goods sold, and selling and administrative expenses from those budgets. We would get our interest and income tax expense from the cash budget that we just completed. This shows the budgeted income statement for SmartTouch Learning based on the other budgets that we have already completed. And it shows that Smart Touch Learning projects to have a net income at the end of December 31st, 2027 of $159,740. The budgeted balance sheet will pull information from several different budgets that have been completed, as well as information from the 2026 balance sheet. So on this slide, we see all of the budgets that we would have to refer to obtain the balances, and we've mentioned many of these balances as we have prepared each one of those budgets. This is the projected or budgeted balance sheet for Smart Touch Learning at December 31st, 2027. And that is the completion of Learning Objective 4.